Everyone good? Ready? Excellent. Thanks for being here today. I'm joined by Assistant Commissioner Narelle and today we're here to announce the next stage in the rollout of our knife laws in South Australia. South Australia now has the toughest knife laws anywhere in the country. We've already rolled out a number of stages of reforms to our knife laws, completely banning children, anyone under the age of 18, from being able to buy dangerous knives with no exceptions. Introducing new offences for adults who supply knives to children knowing they'll be committed for offences, expanding the educational precincts in which you can't carry knives, and also declaring swords and machetes prohibited weapons. What we're announcing today is the timeframe for the rollout of secure storage requirements. We've had a lot of consultation work with the retail sector, and from the 1st of July next year, all dangerous knives with a sharp point or a sharp cutting edge, will be required to be securely stored. That is, if they're in a public place in a retail setting, not able to be taken out by members of the public. So, either behind lock and key or tethered so that they can't be removed. These reforms are squarely aimed at keeping South Australians safer. We have now the toughest knife laws in the country, and we're pleased that South Australians are responding in kind. The police introduced a 3-month surrender period for anyone who's had machetes or swords that are now prohibited weapons. We're just over 2 months into that 3-month period, and already South Australians have handed back nearly 2,500 dangerous weapons, including over 1,000 machetes. So we want to thank South Australians for responding in kind to the new knife laws. There is still the rest of September for people to hand in any swords or machetes or dangerous knives that they have to any police station outside the CBD during normal business hours. After that time frame, after the end of September, people will still be able to surrender weapons, but they'll have to give their name. So we're really encouraged by the amount of South Australians who've responded to the call to hand in what are now prohibited weapons in swords and machetes. And we're urging South Australians, if you've got these items and you don't come under one of the exemptions, to hand them in over the next few weeks. I'll hand over to the Assistant Commissioner, then happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Attorney. Yes, I'd like to confirm that we have had almost 2,500 weapons surrendered since the 1st of July in this surrender period. So we've put the call out to the community to make our community safer by removing these items that may pose a future threat to South Australian safety, and the community has responded, and for that we're very grateful. But you can still come into a police station anywhere not in the CBD, and we ask you to do that if you do have machetes or swords or other weapons. 20% of the weapons that we've had handed in are other weapons that people have decided to bring into a police station. So we encourage you to do that if you haven't had the opportunity yet. We've got through until the 30th of September for people to be able to do that quite anonymously during opening hours of a police station. We ask that you don't do that into the CBD, take it into another police station while it's open, and that we ask that you secure that the weapon in a sheath or with tape and cardboard around it so it's nice and safe, and that you come in a safe and orderly manner. But again, I would like to say thank you to the South Australian community for really embracing this surrender period and helping make our state a lot safer. So thank you.
Question? How much of an issue is having a knife or a knife as a weapon? How many reports have you guys received in this sort of period?
There's continuously reports of people having knives, whether they're in places, public places or otherwise. Knife crime really is a serious issue, which is why these sorts of reforms have come into play, and we're really pleased that the community has taken the effort to remove these items so they can't be potentially misused by people.
What makes you guys so sure that tying the weapons back or not having them as easily accessible for customers is going to decrease the amount of knives out there?
Yeah. So we don't want knives to come into the hands of people who are going to potentially use them to harm other people. So there are, clearly legitimate uses for knives and other weapons. And if there is an exemption that someone has, that's something that will be looked at if police find you with a weapon. But having dangerous knives secured properly in a retail setting really will help stop any opportunistic theft or access by people who really shouldn't be having those weapons.
There's been reports about a cafe in Port Adelaide where one of the young staff members was assaulted on Father's Day. His child had been brought to the ground. Are you aware of that one?
No, sorry, I'm not.
How concerning is that sort of behaviour in the hospitality setting?
Yeah. Any behaviour where a person is harmed, whether that's in hospitality or in retail, is obviously concerning to us, and we would ask people to contact the police and report that.
On another matter, Columbia International High School, the student who had previously been arrested for making threats against other students has had his charges dropped, but a letter has gone out to parents this morning saying that on advice from SAPOL, security measures will remain in place. Is there still a threat to students at Columbia International High School?
All I can say at this point is the investigation is still ongoing and police will be there to make sure that the community is safe in that area.
Attorney General, on other matters, the Victims of Crime Services, 5AA, have reported this morning that will be ending in September. What action is the government taking to ensure that those vital services continue once victims?
Yeah, so certainly when we came to government, we found that there'd been major cuts from the former Liberal government to Victims of Crime Services, VSS. We restored the funding that was cut for particularly the Safer Spaces and Court Companions programs for VSS. VSS had recently informed the Attorney General's Department that their organisation is struggling to organisationally continue with those services. So we're working very closely with VSS and a couple of other service providers to make sure there's no gap in those services for that Safer Spaces and that Court Companion service, so that victims of crime don't have any loss of the services that are provided. So we will continue that funding, but if VSS aren't able to continue providing the services, make sure someone else does provide them, because they are important services for our community, and we don't intend to cut them like the former government did.
So VSS will be ending in September, that's sufficient?
Well, the programs that VSS were funded by, those ones that they were funded by the government to run, the Safer Spaces and Court Companions, they've informed us they're no longer able to do that. So we'll be working with them and other service providers to make sure they're still provided.
Can you guarantee that those services will be continued?
We will continue that funding. Yeah, we reinstated as a government and we will continue that funding.
Victoria will formally table its treaty for First Nations people today. Where is the SA government at progressing with the treaty?
Yeah, we eagerly look at what's happening in other jurisdictions, not just around Australia, but internationally in relation to treaty processes with First Nations people. We've been doing a fair bit of work in the last couple of years internationally, New Zealand and Canada in particular, and also the US with treaty progress. We have a commitment for a truth-telling and a treaty process to roll out in South Australia. At the last election, we committed to implementing a state-based response to the Uluru Statement. We have, after a lot of consultation, put our efforts into getting up and running and making a success our First Nations voice to Parliament. We've had initial discussions with that First Nations voice body about how the steps might look for those next tenets, the truth-telling and the treaty elements, and that is something we will roll out, but we certainly will look at what's happened in Victoria, how they've gone about it. We did, in 2016, start as the first jurisdiction anywhere in Australia looking at a treaty process, and we got a little bit along the way with the signing of the Buthera Agreement with the Narunga people, but certainly that is something we have been looking at and will continue that development.
Could it be tabled before the election?
What tabled before the election?
Could the treaty be tabled before the next election? I know it's been talked about since 2022.
Well, what do you mean treaty tabled? Sorry?
Sorry,
we
further progress on this before the election.
There has been further progress. We have started those discussions with First Nations Voice about what the next steps in furthering that will be. We're under no illusions. This won't be finalised certainly even within a few years. Places in British Columbia in Canada, they are some decades into treaty processes where treaties weren't entered into at the time of colonisation. So we know this will take time, but we are looking forward to those next steps.
Just back onto the knife laws, you're saying they're the toughest in the nation or nation leading. How does that compare, or is on par to Victoria, who have also got machete forwards?
Yeah, certainly the package that we've introduced over the last few months together is by far the toughest anywhere in the country. That is the absolute restriction, no exceptions on young people buying dangerous knives, offences for supplying young people with dangerous knives to commit offences, and the secure storage provisions that will come into effect next year. So altogether they are the toughest in the country, which obviously also include now the machetes and swords being prohibited weapons, not just offensive weapons, but prohibited weapons.
And when you guys are saying you're going to be displaying signs informing shoppers that, you know, the sale event, do you think signs are the right way to go? Like, how, you know,
well, yeah, there will be signs, but there'll be a lot more than just signs. Yeah, if once these come into effect next year, and yeah, we acknowledge it is a fair bit of work for retailers to have to make the decision, and some will make the decision that if they don't sell many knives, they might just decide to stop selling knives, and there'll be some that do that. Similar to when there was a prohibition on spray cans to combat graffiti being available from shelves, and they had to be behind lock and key. There will no doubt be some retailers, we're informed in our consultations, who will decide, yeah, it's just that smaller part of their offering that they'll stop selling those. But there'll be others who will do what's needed, that secure storage, behind lock and key, like you see your spray cans at your hardware stores, or securely tethered. So yeah, that will significantly reduce that chance of opportunistic crime being committed. And unfortunately, we've seen that interstate, where in big retail precincts, people have taken these dangerous knives off shelves and used them to commit offences.
Has that been a big problem here in Adelaide?
We fortunately haven't seen some of the incidents, the tragic incidents that we've seen in the eastern states, but we don't want to get there, and that's exactly why we're being proactive making these changes.
Can I just ask you about the scams that are happening with the Crows tickets? Do you know anything about that and have a comment?
Well, I think the Consumer Affairs Minister has come out and just asked people to be alert and be aware and make sure, when you're spending your money, supporting your footy team, that you're getting what you think you're paying for, just to be vigilant.
What should people be on the lookout for when they're buying off Facebook Marketplace, for example?
Just making sure they're buying genuine tickets, making sure that they're getting what they're paying for.
And just another question in regards to Live Golf. Can you give an update on that situation in regard to trees being culled at North Adelaide?
The plans continue to look at what the development might look like. As I understand, there's no final decision being taken about how that might look.
Experts say it's a 54% at a minimum. What does the government have to say about that?
I think the Liberal Party, and I think Vincent Tarsi has attached himself to exact figures of thousands and thousands of trees. The Premier has come out and said it's not nearly that sort of amount. So, if it's not what Vincent Tarsi has said it's going to be, that's going to be really difficult for his credibility and for him to justify why he's made those claims.
And what do you make of the event moving to Kyam in 2027?
What's that?
What do you make of the event moving in 2027?
These have been discussions that are underway between the part of government, the major events part who run this, and golf clubs. I think many South Australians and visitors from interstate and internationally have gone to Live Golf and enjoyed the offering. South Australia does these sorts of events better than anywhere else in the country. You look at our arts festivals, you look at Gather Round, so it's hardly a surprise that people are interested when we put these sorts of events on.
We'll get some footage.